Hello, good afternoon, Rebecca.
Oh, hello, Nick. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too. Just ahead of the Easter break, we're going to talk not about eggs, but
Mm,
things that can break in
absolutely.
terms of relationships with franchisees. And when they break, you will need a legal agreement. This we know.
Absolutely.
Wearing my consulting hat, lots of people over the years have said to me, well, franchising is just a question of a manual and a legal agreement and a bit of training, and off you go. You know different, I know different,
Mm,
but it's helping people to understand this that I think is the purpose of this little session.
yeah.
So, of course, you have a legal agreement. Of course, you have a manual.
Yes.
Now, I might ask you, at what stage did you sit down and write a manual? And at what stage in your franchise development did you think about the legal agreement?
Yes. So, in terms of the manual, that was something I was aware about really after my initial conversations with my franchise consultant about whether it was a viable option or not. And I knew that I couldn't just launch the business as a franchise without the manual. And it slightly hung over me because I knew it had to be substantial in order to actually add value. So I always knew that I needed to get stuck into it, and I always knew it needed to be quite a meaty system. And I remember feeling quite daunted at the beginning, but actually, when it was broken down into sort of doable stages, it was absolutely fine. And I could actually look at it afterwards and feel very proud of actually write down those processes, and actually the end result, you suddenly realize actually what value you have in your head, but also as part of the business.
Mhm. So you sat down with a framework, perhaps a
Mm-hmm.
chapter index,
Yeah.
and then thought, what am I going to put in here?
Yes.
And then you started thinking and things started to happen.
And I think because our business is quite creative, we've got a strong brand, I knew I could bring it alive through the manual. And that was a challenge and issue to work out how I was going to do that. But I worked closely with one of my branding managers, and we sort of have produced something that as I said, I feel proud of, but that fits with our business model as well as the brand and how we look.
Did
So
it cause you to think about what you do in the business?
yes. So that's what I mean about I felt proud afterwards of
Mm.
actually realizing the breadth of what we do. Because in my head, I think, oh, well, we just meet clients and then we work out what they want and then we find the solution. But actually, there's so much more to it than that.
Mm.
And that's where those chapter headings were so important. But I use the manual now when I'm doing inductions with new franchisees, and I take each chapter heading and we utilize that as part of the induction. And I bring the right experts in for that.
Part of the training process.
Yes.
Yeah, you're using it exactly the right way. I think what I meant in that last question really was when you started to say to yourself, now we do this, did you say to yourself, why do we do this? Could we do it in a different way? Or do we need to do this?
Yes, and actually it's changed even more now. So I'll often make amendments to the manual. So that's something that's worth
Yeah.
mentioning. You don't just write the manual and never look at it again. So it's an evolving document. But you're right, I did challenge a few things at the beginning and think, actually, why are we doing it like this? And then
Mm.
we'll perhaps chat internally and sort of look at different solutions. No, absolutely.
So your manual is a living document, which is exactly what it should be. It reflects the way the business is changing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you compel your franchisees to follow those changes that you put into the manual?
Oh, good question. Yeah, so I will often send those updates to them, and we keep our manual in our shared drive, so all the franchisees are then aware of any changes or amendments. And I will often speak to the latest franchisee, my newest one, and sort of when we do a review of how they're getting on, sort of 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks into their journey with us, I'll often say, was there something that was missing or something that we could add in at that stage? I'll then make sure the other franchisees are aware of that. I'm also aware that some franchisees still look at the manual, 2 years in, and then others that have sort of used it to glance through it. And because everyone's so different about how they interpret information, aren't they, as well? So
This is a slight problem in a way, because what I'm trying to draw towards here is that you write a manual that reflects the business as it was when you started the
yeah,
journey to be a franchisor. And around that time, you have to establish a legal agreement.
yes,
The legal agreement is written and set in stone. You can't change it for the 5 years or whatever. It's meant to cover everything that you want the franchisee to do and all the things you don't want them to do. But life goes on. And so then your business evolves, and that legal agreement may no longer reflect the way the business is.
Mhm.
So most franchisors will have within that legal agreement a considerable number of references to the manual,
Yes. Yeah.
so that the franchisee is obliged to follow the changes.
Mhm.
But of course, they can only follow the changes if you send them out, number
Yes.
one. Number
Yeah.
two,
I see what you mean. Yeah.
number two, you make sure that they actually acknowledge that they've received them. Because
Yes.
there's always that, oh, well, I didn't know, you never told me thing that goes
Yeah.
on.
Mm.
If there's a point at which you want to hit the franchisee over the head with the legal agreement for some reason, and they say, well, I'm just doing what I was taught, you need an audit trail to show that you.
Yes. No, absolutely. Yeah.
So talking of hitting franchisees over the head sounds fairly crude. But we all recognize, I mean, franchisees themselves recognize that you have to police what happens within the network.
Yeah.
And for yourself, you have to police them. How do you see yourself using that legal agreement in sticky situations?
I think for me, it's my sort of comfort blanket. So we have had a couple of questions recently. So someone was querying the fact, for example, that do we have to be VAT registered in order to offer the services? And actually, one of my franchisees got there before me and said, absolutely, we do. It's in the legal, it's in the legal agreement. So I was reassured that actually they are aware of what's in there, and that it gives me that backing and sort of support to know that it's all been listed down there. And actually, when we launched, we did a pilot agreement, which has now been beefed up and is much more substantial as we've grown as well. So that was an interesting to sort of observe the different types of agreement you can have and the sort of what varies between the two.
Yeah, it's probably worth me mentioning there that often people, when they start in franchising, are not entirely sure how the franchise is going to finish up. You're doing these pilot experiments, for want of a better word. You're doing these pilot first franchisees who you'll work closely with, and they'll get all your love and attention. But it might be that the legal agreement you started with isn't the legal agreement that matters 12 months down the line.
Yeah.
It might also be that you're short of, bad budget. A full legal agreement is an expensive thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important to have. I liken legal agreements to car brakes. The one thing you don't skimp on in repairing the car is the brakes.
No, absolutely.
And in my opinion, it's exactly the same with the legal agreement, because you will have to use it one day. It won't be a nice thing to do, but you will have to use it.
Yeah.
And so starting with a light pilot agreement costs you a bit of money. To an extent, that money is then wasted, because 12 months, 18 months down the line, you're going to move on to a stronger agreement. But it does give you time to get all the detail.
Yes, and that's what I liked about it. It was sort of a soft approach, learned what we needed to do, and then beefed it up in the larger document. Absolutely.
That was rather a long session on legal agreements.
It's an important subject, Nick.
Exactly so. You couldn't have put it better if you tried. And I think on that note, we'll say Happy Easter.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.